One last chance. I'm giving this one last chance. This 4P10 engine has been refusing to start for over a year, which means I'm a year behind in building our 2013 Mitsubishi Fuso FG into an overland camper. But all of the work that I've done on this truck is not going to get us anywhere, literally, unless the engine will start. So today we're going to give one more kick at the can to get this engine running with what we have. Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. Now, last week after I filmed the video and while I was editing it, I discovered a bit of a mistake that I'd made in the diagnostic process. Yeah, I completely missed the fuel gushing out of that injector connection. And when I went to try to test my fuel pressure again, I had no battery left. Oh, are you kidding me? Or at least that's what I hope. Either way, the battery is charged now. So obviously step one, we need to fix it so that injector connection doesn't dump all the fuel pressure. And then number two, will the engine crank over or do I now have a problem with the starter? Well, the injector line should be a pretty easy fix. I just tightened these together without the nut being on quite the right angle compared to the end of the fuel line. So just gotta settle that flat and then tighten the nut up. We just take a quick look to make sure, yeah, we shouldn't have any issues with the end of that. So we should be able to, basically this sits flat against the end of the tube, the injector tube. And if I tightened it when it was like this, because the nut pivots and the bolt can pivot, it's not necessarily flat on the end. So we wanna make sure flat on the end, tighten the nut, and then we can just snug these together. We don't need it too tight, it's just two flat surfaces snugging together. Why is my wrench not fitting now? There we go. Hopefully now those will seal. And the next step is going to be to see if the starter will turn over. And with the key on, I can clearly see I do not have a seal here. But I'm going to try giving it a quick crank anyway, just to see if we've still got two problems. All I need at this point is to hear the starter engage. Ah! So we definitely have two problems. Not at all what I was hoping for. Now, other than all the cranking that I've been doing to try and diagnose the fuel issue, these two are unlikely related. What I'm going to do now is reconnect the injector line so that I can continue to key the engine on, crank it, without worrying about fuel leaking out of injector pipe number 4. It's just another step backwards. No big deal, right? The bottom line of what's going on here is the starter motor doesn't have the power available to do the work that's required. There's two things that could be causing that. Either the work has significantly increased, i.e. mechanically the engine is no longer capable of turning over with the amount of power the starter would normally supply, or for one reason or another, the starter is not able to get the electrical capacity required to do the work that it would normally need to do. Now, because the charger is saying that the batteries are fully charged and I can read the voltage on my diagnostic unit, I know that the voltage of the batteries is sufficient to be able to turn the starter motor over. At least we know at the batteries and where the ECU pulls its power from. That doesn't mean the starter itself is receiving sufficient voltage. If we've got a bad connection or a loose connection, something that's loosened up over time, we could have a massive voltage drop between the batteries and the starter. Voltage drop is pretty easy to check with a voltmeter at the starter, but if we're stalling the starter motor out because mechanically the engine can't turn over, we would also see a big voltage drop. So probably the most logical thing to check first, does the engine still mechanically turn over? If I can still mechanically turn the engine over within reason of the same amount of force as I could before, it's probably not a mechanical issue. We can bypass all of that and go straight to troubleshooting on the electrical side. Yeah, that's a really good thing. I'm glad that turns. Oh, am I ever glad that turns. Next quick check I'm gonna do is voltage that's coming to the starter, both while we're cranking and while we're static. Now, static is easy. We've got 13 volts, and that's just running from a random ground on the engine down to the positive terminal where the starter gets fed. If this voltage drops when we turn the key and the starter doesn't turn, it's likely that we have a bad or loose connection between the starter and the battery. or we have a heavily loaded starter. We've got a little bit of a drop with the ignition on because there's other things like the fuel pump running. Let's give it a click and see what happens. So that voltage did not drop at all, which tells me there's no issue with the wiring from the battery to the starter. Next, underneath the truck at the starter, I'm just going to switch it from the incoming line of the solenoid to the outgoing line of the solenoid. If the voltage drops on the outgoing side of the solenoid, but not on the incoming side, it means the voltage drop is inside the starter solenoid. So it's not a bad starter, it's a bad solenoid. Unlike the incoming side of the starter, we won't read any voltage here until we turn the key. So we get 12 volts on the outgoing side of the solenoid. We're now down to basically the same two things we started with, but inside the starter instead of on the whole truck. We know power is being delivered to the starter motor itself. We're getting through the solenoid, but either mechanically the starter is unable to turn because it's stuck, or electrically something's gone wrong inside. So electrically, we could have a brush that's not in contact with the commutator, we could have a bad spot on the commutator or a burned out connection, we could have a winding that's burned out, mechanically we could have a bad bearing, but all of those are inside the starter, so I think it's time to find my spare starter. Where is my spare starter? I know it's in here somewhere. How do I get out of here? Got it. Old one out, new one going in. I guess technically they're both old ones, but the original one is going back in. I'm not gonna bore you with showing you the entire starter swap. I've already done that. If you want more details on it, check out this video. The link is in the description. The starter swap is done. The battery's reconnected. Let's see if it turns over. The ignition comes on. That's a good start. There we go. Doesn't sound like it's cranking quite as fast, but at least we can turn it over, and that should let us check to see if we're building fuel pressure, and we can muck around with the injectors again. So now we're back to the point where I'm gonna give this one last chance. Can we rule out if the injectors are causing the no start problem? I've cycled the key a number of times. All the injectors and returns are connected. We have about 72 psi on the rail, which is from the electric lift pump. I'm going to give it a try cranking. This is right back to where we were. Though I've cycled the key a number of times since having everything disconnected, I want to see if we can build any fuel pressure at all with the injectors connected. I would say no. So can I pop the returns off and see which injector is bypassing fuel out the return? That's odd. There is a little bit. And it seems to continue after I stop cranking. I would say number one looks like it's still bypassing. I know it doesn't look like a lot, but I don't think it should be doing that. One last chance. Let's swap out injector number one. I'm getting too much practice at this. What I've done is I've taken the previous injector number 2 that I removed before. I've run it through another disassembly and ultrasonic cleaning process, reassembled it. I've now put it in injector number 1. We're going to recode it and see what happens. Recoding from the Autel is easy. From the menus, go to Teach in Process, then select Injection Valve and press F1. Give it a few seconds and you'll hear it cycle. At this point, the teach-in process for the injector is complete. Press Continue and then exit the menu by pressing Escape. This Autel scanner has been a lifesaver, but not all scanners work with Fuso, so make sure you check the links in the video description to get the right one. No pressure with the injectors connected. So what if we again disconnect all the injectors?
Well, hey, look at that.
And clearly, with the injectors properly blocked off and disconnected, we absolutely build pressure. The blue line is rail pressure, the red line is what it's expecting, and several times in there, we're able to hit it. Well, I think that was my last chance to try and get this engine running without dumping money into it. It's time to buy some new injectors. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you feel like supporting the cause, scan that QR code, share the video if you think it'll help someone else. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.